Hello, this is Chapter 10, Conflict and Negotiation. So inside this chapter, we're going to look at the nature of conflict, specifically how it um, affects organizations. How can it be managed? The negotiations within the organization, and alternative strategies for negotiation. All right. So first up, um, let's look at substantive conflict. Uh, this is a fundamental disagreement over ends or goals to be pursued and the means for their accomplishment. A dispute with one's boss or another coworker over a plan of action to be followed, such as a new product strategy, a new advertising strategy. Um, as when you work together with people all day long, it's normal that people have different viewpoints and sort of small conflicts in how to get things done will develop. So this is nothing that doesn't happen on a day-to-day basis for everybody in the work environment, but it's important that these conflicts are solved in a constructive way that doesn't leave people resentful or angry. Basically in a way that emotional dissatisfaction for the person who is losing the conflict doesn't linger. Okay. Okay, so emotional. Let's just talk about conflict in general. Conflict in general occurs when, two or more people disagree over issues that are either work related, and sometimes we call them substantive, or emotional, and it creates friction between them. So the emotional side of the emotional conflict, um, difficulties that can arise over feelings between people, and the conflict is commonly sometimes called a clash of personalities. How many times, for example, have you heard comments such as, I can't stand working with him, she rubs me the wrong way, I'm going to stab him in the throat with my pen, I wouldn't, you know, uh, these comments are common at work when people take things too personally. Okay, so here's a famous quote um, that I'll just give you a second to read over. I don't need to read it to you, but interesting. All right. Okay, so let's look at levels of conflict in organizations. You have your first interpersonal, your intrapersonal, intergroup, and interorganizational. So these are different levels of conflicts. So let's look at each of them. The interpersonal conflict occurs between two or more individuals who are in opposition to one another. It may be substantive, emotional, or both. Um, two persons debating each other aggressively on the merits of hiring a specific job applicant is an example, of a more work-related interpersonal conflict. Uh, Two people in the workplace continually in disagreement over each other's choice of work attire is an example of emotional interpersonal conflict. So you get the idea here. Intrapersonal conflict is tensions experienced within the individual due to actual or perceived pressures from incompatible goals or expectations. So here's two people, sort of what you'd say in a different wavelength. Um, so this is going to be, you know, two members are just, they have different expectations, different goals, different, ideas for the solution, and it's just not compatible with each other. Okay, then we have intergroup conflict. Occurs between teams, perhaps one competing for sacred resources or rewards, or perhaps one whose members have emotional problems with one another. A classic example is a conflict among functional groups or departments, accounting versus sales, marketing, and production. Some of these conflicts can be work-related roots. Some can be more emotional, based on egos of the people who run the departments. So I'm sure we've all experienced those. And then we have the intra organizational conflict. The most commonly thought in terms of competition rivalry that characterizes firms operating in the same marketplace. So, an example is continuing battle between U.S. businesses and their global rivals, such as Toyota and General Motors, for example. It could be organizations such as Cablevision and DirecTV, or Verizon's Fios and DirecTV. These are all pretty much familiar with that. Okay, functional conflict, also called constructive conflict. Now, this results in benefits to individuals, um, the team, or the organization. On the positive side, conflict can bring important problems to the surface so they can be addressed. It can cause decisions to be considered carefully and perhaps reconsidered to ensure that the right path of acting or action is going to be taken. It can increase the amount of information used for decision making, and it can offer opportunities for creativity that can improve performance. So, functional conflict is going to be better for business. It's conflict that not all conflict is bad, and this is conflict that's good. You know, uh, Now destructive conflict, or sometimes called dysfunctional conflict, works as sort of the opposite force. It's the disadvantage. The corporation is going to be, or the individual team, going to be disadvantaged by this type of conflict. It diverts energies, hurts groups, leaves people emotionally scarred, promotes interpersonal hostilities, creates conflict, future conflict, and just overall develops a negative environment for employees. Here's a little graph we can look at. We see the impact of performance from negative to positive and the intensity of conflict. So you could see that, you know, if let's see on this chart here. So if the intensity of the conflict is sort of in the middle area here, we get the highest peak where this, we could get the most positive impact on performance. So we have the negative, destructive conflict is always going to be, excuse me, at best neutral and at worst very negative, where the positive is always going to start to neutral and get most positive. So the most positive area for performance is a middle level of intensity for the impact on performance. And people would say, wouldn't the higher intensity be better on the positive side? No, because it can break down and become destructive. So we want a manageable level of conflict so that it can remain positive. And a positive conflict, if it gets too intense, can become destructive. So, but there's always exceptions, and don't bet your life on that graph. It's just one person's graphical representation of it. It's not right for every situation. Okay, so potential benefits of functional conflict. So let's just look at that for a second. Like I was saying before, brings important problems to the surface that can be addressed appropriately through organizational channels. And it causes these problems to be carefully considered, increases the amount of information. People are going to look into it more, request some research, and provides an opportunity for creativity or a constructive solution. On dysfunctional conflict, this is going to, as I was saying before, take away energies and time that could be spent constructively. It can hurt the group's performance or cohesion, promote interpersonal hostilities as it spills over from a higher level to a lower level, create a negative work environment, decrease job performance, and can also contribute to absenteeism based on and poor job turnover or high job turnover based on the negative environment. So now each organization has their own culture, which is something you're studying in this class and perhaps writing a paper on, and they have their own way of dealing with conflict. So a company's culture and their tendency to how they handle conflict is going to be different from company to company, and that must be considered in any, uh, you know, anybody from the outside coming in looking at it, or you studying a conflict at a different company's culture. Sensitivity and respect while working across cultures can often tap the performance advantage of both diversity and constructive conflict. So now this could also be looked at, culture and conflict, not just the culture of the organization, but the culture of different countries as well, and different peoples as well. It can be thought of in this circumstance. Now, okay, before we get to that, so many signs of cultural wear and tear in social relationships. We experience difficulties from racial tensions, homophobia, gender gaps, and much more. These arise from tensions among people who are different, for one form or another in some way, and these can be brought into the organizational level by individuals. They're often considered a reminder of cultural differences that must be considered from their conflict potential. Consider the cultural dimensions of time orientation. When people from short-term cultures such as the United States try to work with people from long-term cultures such as Japan, the likelihood of a conflict in development and deployment and strategy is going to be high. So this is an example where culture, whether it's between different companies, or between different individuals, different cult, company, I'm sorry, countries, culture is going to play a key aspect. Okay, let's switch over to conflict resolution. Um, so situations um, can have many issues or reasons for why um, people have a conflict. So the resolution, of course, is a way um, to solve it. So if you can eliminate the reasons for the conflict, then you can solve the conflict. I mean, pretty basic stuff here. So it's always best to deal with important conflicts in such a way that you can completely solve them and eliminate any chance of them occurring again in the future. Otherwise, it can be something that's going to be reoccurring, and it's just a waste of companies' resources. So if we look at this little chart here, um, we have sort of the stages of conflict. And we have the antecedent conditions, um, set the conditions for conflict. We have the perceived conflict, substance or emotional differences here are sensed. We have the felt conflict, tensions created, motivation to act, and we have the manifest conflict addressed by conflict resolution or suppression. Okay, so this is basically what I just explained. Um, okay, so I mean we talked about this on the other slide, but it's important. I mean, they have these always have these stages of conflict and stages. Um, I don't know necessarily. It's we sort of just go through them naturally. No one ever actually stops to say, okay, I'm in stage 3, moving into stage 4. But I guess it's interesting to see how you can kind of break that down. All right. So causes of conflict. We're going to talk about 3 causes here: vertical, horizontal, and line staff conflict. Now, the very nature of organizations is hierarchical um, hierarchies that system where sort of top to bottom provides convenient setting for conflict to occur as individuals and teams try to work with one another. Now, the vertical conflict occurs between, as you would think, the higher up people in the level, um, supervisors, managers, vice presidents, and other team members disagreeing over resources, goals, deadlines, and performance, things of that nature. Um, Now, the horizontal conflict occurs between groups of workers who work at the same level. So everybody, um, I guess if you think horizontal line, everybody at the same level, maybe all supervisors getting together or all team members, uh, commonly involves goal incompatibilities, resource sharing, and or it could be an interpersonal factor. Now, staff line conflict involves disagreements between the line and staff personnel. The lower rungs, people manufacturing the product, the people who basically aren't managers or supervisors and work for somebody else. Uh, Now, the staff personnel would be such personnel that have control over decisions on matters such as budget, technology, human resource practices. So these are the people who are directly sort of monitoring the line employees and working with them on these issues, such as maybe a human resource worker who is helping a line employee work on selecting benefits or enforcing a company policy on a break time or something like that. And they're commonly there's a role conflict that can occur when the communication of the task expectations is unclear or upsetting in some way, such as one team member received different expectations from his boss and other team members, and conflict is likely to occur when people are placed in situations where it's hard to understand who's responsible for what. Okay. Sometimes a line staff conflict you can think of between supervisor and a lower level employee. That could certainly be another a staff line, probably a more common one. But I mean, there's going to be a lot more types of conflicts in the company. These are just if you wanted to parcel people into three groups, and you had the vertical conflicts of the upper management, or the horizontal conflicts of employees of similar rank, and the staff line conflict of people between supervisors and their people they're supervising below, or staff employees in um, human resources, sales, marketing, accounting, who may have to interface with some line employees. These can also lead to some conflicts, especially if the two people in question are not in the boss and subordinate role. They're not their direct boss. So it could be, especially if it's confused about, okay, I know this is my boss, but he's also, this other guy's the vice president, this guy's the president, this guy is a manager of another department. If they tell me to do something, what should I do? And of course, the answer is go back to your boss and say, so and so asked me to complete this assignment. I thought I should let you know. What should I do? Because I think he's confused about who works for him. All right. And that would be, okay, so managing conflicts, role ambiguity, conflicts. Of course, when people aren't clear about expectations or their role, and when two people think they're in charge of a particular area, when one isn't and one is, this could, definitely lead to a conflict. Task and workflow interdependencies. Um, Now, these can occur when people or coworkers are required to cooperate to meet very stressful or challenging goals or situations, or deal with hard problems. So this can definitely lead, and the pressures on can lead to additional conflicts. Domain ambiguities. Now, this can be a situation. This could be teams or individuals. Um, if they don't have proper direction on what they're supposed to be doing, or if their goals are not properly stated or understood by the team or team members, uh, this could, you know, they can basically step on each other's toes. When individuals working on projects, they could be overlapping with other individuals or teams, and if the authority of who's doing what and who has the power of certain things, the jurisdictions aren't clearly defined, there could be issues. Just think about, if police officers' jurisdictions weren't completely defined, there could be a lot of conflicts along a border between two counties or two states, about whose jurisdiction is what. But luckily for us, it is well defined. Also, resource scarcity. Um, the tighter things are as far as the budgets and what people have to work with, the more um, conflict can arise. Now, the asymmetries of power or value, this can also can occur with individuals or teams um, when there's a perceived difference in status or influence or power that people who probably are viewing themselves as equal, but if they're not um, um, if their work relationship, there can definitely be a conflict um, resulting from symmetry. How can I say I'm having a problem describing this? I'll give you an example. When a low power person needs to help a high power person who does not respond when people who hold dramatically different values are forced to work together on a task, or when a high status person is required to interact with a more low status person, sometimes a conflict can occur when they're in different positions of power within the team. That's another way of looking at it. This is a little bit more of a nuance here, and I hope I didn't confuse you too much when I was trying to explain it. Okay, indirect strategies. Um, okay, managers will tell you that not all conflict in teams and organizations can be resolved by getting people involved to adopt new attitudes, behaviors, or stances towards one another. Think about it. Aren't there likely to be times when personalities and emotions prove irreconcilable? In such cases, a direct or structural approach to conflict management can help. Uh, it uses such strategies as reducing interdependencies, appeals to common goals, hierarchy referrals, um, alterations in use of mythology or scripts to deal with conflict situations. So, if we talk about managed interdependencies, when work overflow conflicts exist, managers can adjust the level of interdependencies among teams or individuals. One simple action is decoupling, or taking the action to eliminate or reduce conflict between conflicting parties, separating them, putting them in a timeout, moving them between departments. In some cases, team tasks can be adjusted to reduce the number of required points of coordination. The conflicting parties are separated as much as possible from one another. Buffering is another approach that can be used when inputs of one team are outputs of another. The classic buffering techniques is to build a inventory or buffer between the teams so that the output slowdown or excess is absorbed by the inventory and doesn't directly pressure the large group. So maybe it's an art department, and one group is writing. They have a deadline to produce something, and one group is writing the script, and the other group is doing the artwork. And the script takes 28 of the 30 days. So when the time they get to do the artwork, they can't finish the project, and they're mad at the people writing the script, and everybody's upset it isn't done on time. So they may have an inventory of script. So when the art department, they can start working right away and start working on pages ahead of time while the script department is completing them. Conflict can sometimes be reduced by assigning people to serve as liaisons between groups that are prone to conflict. So there may be, the classic situation was, you're the child and the mom says, tell your father to take out the trash. And your father says to you, tell your mother that I'm not taking out the trash. So instead of conflicting with each other, they try to find someone else in the middle who's a neutral party. That's a very rudimentary approach. Now, appealing to common goals, this can focus attention on conflicting individuals and teams by one mutually desirable conclusion. This elevates any dispute to a level of common ground where disagreements can be put into perspective. In the course of a team where members are arguing over content choices for a PowerPoint presentation, for example, it may help to remind everyone the goal is to impress the instructor and get an A for the presentation, and this is only possible if everybody works together. So these type of appeals for the common interest are good. Sometimes can help manage the conflict. Also, upward referral. Sometimes you could use a chain of command for conflict resolution. Problems are moved up um, from the level of conflict or to our senior management to help to address. So it's basically like telling the boss. Although this can be tempting, sometimes it's not always the best solution. If the conflict is severe or reoccurring, the continued use of talking to your boss to try and resist the conflict can become annoying to them. Higher level supervisors and managers removed from day-to-day affairs may fail to see the real cause of this conflict, and any attempts at resolution may be superficial or not appreciated or useful. Generally, most managers are not going to want to get involved, or if you go to them too often with this approach, they're going to see you as ineffective and a low ability to handle conflict. So sometimes the upward referral is a last resort. I think most of us will agree. Okay, altering scripts and myths. In some situations, conflict is superficially managed by scripts or behavioral routines that are part of an organization's culture. The scripts become ritual that allow the conflict parties to vent their frustrations and recognize that they are mutually dependent upon one another. An example is a monthly meeting of department heads, which is held presumably for purpose of coordination and problem solving, but actually becomes a polite forum for arguments. Managers in such case know their scripts and accept the difficulty of truly resolving any major conflicts by sticking to the script, expressing low-key disagreement, and quickly acting as everyone had been taken care of, or everything has been taken care of. For instance, the managers can leave the meeting with everyone feeling a superficial sense of accomplishment. So it's really just going through the motions and nothing is really getting done. Okay. So take a second to look at this chart on conflict management strategies. Now we go from cooperative to uncooperative and unassertive to assertive. So compromise is nicely situated in the middle. And so it's direct conflict management strategies. These are different strategies that you could use. Smoothing or accommodation is very, of course, cooperative, but not super assertive. Avoidance, again, uncooperative and unassertive, just trying to ignore the problem. That doesn't work well. Collaborate and problem solve is sort of the best of both worlds. It's very assertive and cooperative. And then competition, authoritative command would be sort of uncooperative, but very assertive, just sort of the boss, okay, now no one gets to play with the toy. A sort of example. So compromise sits here in the middle is usually the best solution to any type of direct work conflict is a compromise where both parties have solved the issue. So let's talk about different ways, different direct conflict strategies. And the first one we're going to talk about the lose-lose conflict. Okay, a lose-lose conflict is probably the worst way of dealing with conflict or managing conflict. It's sort of think of the two kids fighting over a toy and they can't agree to how to play with it cooperatively. So the mom takes the toy away and says, okay, neither of you get to play with it now. So in a work environment, it can be a little bit different. So nobody in the lose-lose situation, nobody really gets what he or she wants in the conflict solution. Underlying reasons for the conflict remain unaffected, and similar conflict is likely to occur in the future. Think about two countries at war, and then when they to end the war, they both take concessions, and sometimes if it isn't exactly If the concessions are too harsh, it may result in a war again. Avoidance is is an extreme where one acts assertively and everyone simply pretends that the conflict doesn't exist and hopes it will go away. Accommodation or smoothing is sometimes called, as it's sometimes called, involves playing down the differences among the conflicting parties and highlighting similarities and areas of agreement. Uh, Peaceful coexistence ignores the real essence of the conflict and often creates frustration and resentment. Compromise occurs when each party shows moderate assertiveness and cooperation and ultimately willing to give up something of value for the other to end the conflict, but no one gets exactly what they want. So it's really not the best, but sometimes it's the only solution, the lose-lose conflict. Okay, what about the win-lose conflict? One party, just like it sounds, one party achieves the desired at the expense of the other party. It's highly assertive and low cooperativeness, as we saw in the chart earlier. Um, Situation. It may result from outright competition in which one party achieves a victory through force. It may result um, not just force, it could be superior skill or domination. It may also occur as a result of authoritative command, whereby a formal um, authority, such as manager or team leader, simply dictate the solutions and specifies um, what is gained or what is lost by each party. So the win-lose situation fails to address the root of the cause of the conflict and tends to, to suppress the desire of at least one of the conflicting parties. So this isn't the best solution either. Okay. Okay, so the win-win conflict, which is we all like this, and everybody quotes the win-win solution a lot, is the best of both worlds. Is achieved by blending, high cooperativeness and high assertiveness. Collaboration and problem solving involve recognition by all conflicting parties that something is wrong and needs attention. It stresses um, gathering and value and evaluating information and solving disputes and making choices. All relevant issues are raised and openly discussed. A win-win outcome eliminates reasons for continued uh, reconstructing the conflict because nothing has been avoided or suppressed and everything has been solved to a satisfactory agreement on both sides. So the ultimate test of collaboration and problem solving is whether or not the conflict parties see the solution to the conflict as one achieves each party's goals, two is accepted by both parties, and three establishes a process whereby all parties involved see a responsibility to be open and honest about the facts and feelings surrounding the conflict. You know, so this is the what we really strive for. So in your experience, think about if you had a coworker. So think of a conflict that you had with a specific person. It doesn't necessarily have to be a coworker. If you can't think of any, think of a friend or a family member. Was it handled directly or indirectly? How was it resolved? Think about the techniques that were used. Does any of them fit exactly what we're talking about in the book? And has the conflict reappeared? So, or maybe keep this in mind. Some of these strategies if you're involved in the existing conflicts. Now, of course, one way to solve conflicts is negotiation. It's a process where people jointly come together and make agreements um, to help, solve the conflict. So, a negotiation is basically a way of give and take. Okay. So, substance goal. Okay, substance goals deal with outcomes that relate to the content issues under negotiations. The dollar amount of a salary is offered in a recruiting situation, for one example. Relationship goals um, deal with the outcome that relate to how well people involved in the negotiation and any, how do I say, how can I explain this? trying to think of the best way to describe this. I guess it's basically the relations people will maintain after the conflict is solved. So the goals of, I guess, in any conflict is the parties remain neutral or friendly, and they're satisfied with the outcome. Uh, okay, effective negotiation factors. One is quality. Uh, you know that basically the negotiation is good and the agreement is both smart and agreeable to all sides. Harmony, that that harmonious results are are the outcome, and that good interpersonal relationships are developed after negotiations. Efficiency, it's efficient, that's not a time waster or unnecessarily costly solution to the problem. So I mean, we've all negotiated for things in the past, and often there's a real skill or art to negotiation, um, but there's also an ethical aspect to negotiations, and this is what in this day and age we have to keep a keen eye on. Everybody's involved in negotiation. They all have to be, striving for a high ethical standard of conduct. Um, but sometimes this goal can be sidetracked or overlooked by people's self motivations and self interests and self preservations. Uh, so whenever you know a negotiation should be put to some sort of test to make sure that um, it's fair, and that ethically the solution is also an ethical one to something that's going to be in the interest of the organization or the country or the world, depending on how serious the negotiations are. Okay. So let's look at different types of negotiations. Um, all right, so we have the two-party negotiation, which is obviously just two people involved. The group negotiation, where it's people negotiating as a group. The intergroup negotiation, where the manager of a group that is negotiating with another group, and the constituency negotiation. Each party represents a broader group. So these are just just four different types. Um, so let's look at this distributive negotiation, and this is going to focus on positions staked out or declared by conflicting parties. Each party tries to claim certain positions of the available, shall we say, pie, whose overall size is considered fixed. Okay, when we talk about an integrative negotiation, sometimes can be called a principled negotiation, focuses on the merits of the issue. Everyone involved tries to enlarge the available pie and find mutually agreed upon ways of distributing it, rather than claiming stakes to certain proportions of it. Think of the conversations you overhear as part of a team situation. The notion that my way or the highway, um, let's find a way to make this work out for both of us, is more of the two sort of expressions, the my way or the highway, which would not be um, very good integrative way of a solution, but the let's find a way to work this out for both of us is more integrative. So it's a way of um, trying to stay with the merits of the issue and get a solution that's going to work for everybody. All right. So let's go back to the distributive negotiations. So who is going to set this resource? So we have what we could say hard or soft. on this situation. So hard distributive negotiation takes place when each party holds out to get its own way. This leads the competition whereby each party seeks dominance over the other and tries to maximize their own self-interests. The hard approach may lead to a win-lose outcome in which one party dominates the other. The soft distributive negotiation takes place when one party or both parties make concessions to get things over with. A soft approach leads to accommodation, in which one party gives the other, or compromises in which the other party also gives up something of value in the agreement. In either case, it's they may not both be 100% satisfied with the negotiation, but it's a way to both kind of give in a little bit and get to a common ground. Okay, so the bargaining zone. Think of it as a range from one person's minimum point to the other person's maximum point. The bargaining zone, say, for a house or a car, could be, say we're talking about a house, maybe we're talking about somewhere between 350,000 and 375,000. There's a positive bargaining zone since the reservation points of the two parties could overlap. So there's the positive bargaining zone exists when they can both operate in the area of comfort. So there's a point where if the person proposes an amount too much below this bargaining zone, the deal is off. And if the seller wants too much above, the deal is off. So the bargaining zone is where a deal can really be struck, and you may have a zone of anywhere from $1,000 to $50,000 where you're playing with, and you're both sort of going to negotiate back and forth to get. It's sort of that classic, a negotiation where someone says, okay, 400,000, and the other person says, no, 450,000. And then they say, okay, 410,000. No, 440,000. 420,000. The other person says 440,000, or 430,000, and they meet in the middle, and then they, agree on that bargaining zone. So they start in each end of their zone and kind of meet and agree in the middle, or somewhere in the zone. Okay. Integrative negotiation. Let's talk about that for a minute. Okay, how can the resources best be used? So less confrontational than distributive negotiation, but allows for a broader range of alternative solutions to be considered and is more likely to end up in a win-win situation. So because it permits a broader range of different alternative solutions, it can be thought of as more in the theme of negotiation or negotiation process. So it may take longer, it may take more time and energy, but this integrated agreement can be well worth the investment. Both parties can walk away feeling that they're winning and completely solve the conflict. So this is the best, I would say, of the solutions. So if we look at the foundations of the integrative negotiation, so one, we can look at attitudinal, and this is, I guess, the first of three that we're going to look at, and the parties have to trust each other. And this is a reason why ethics in maintaining relationships is so important in negotiation, that each party must convey a willingness to share information with the other party. Without shared information, effective problem solving is unlikely to occur. So they have to basically trust, and want to work together. Okay. Number two, behavioral. So this is a little bit longer here. During negotiation, all behavior is important for both its actual impact and its impressions it leaves behind. This means that following behavioral foundations of integrative agreements must be carefully considered and included in any negotiator's repertoire of skills and capabilities. So here, some of them, of course, separating the people from the problem, trying to make it not personal. Um, don't allow emotional considerations to affect negotiations, trying to um, when people are getting emotional or um, effectively stop that from interfering with negotiations. Focus on common interests rather than the solutions. So start at a point where there's some common interests, or there, we're both trying to save the world, or eliminate hunger, or get more profits, and then build up from there. Avoid premature judgments. So when you see someone making judgments that doesn't have all the facts, or is too quick to put their own personal attitudes into the negotiation, trying to figure out a way to avoid that. Keep the identification of alternative separate from their valuation. Um, so basically giving a more freer environment for the alternatives to be looked at and thought about, and judge possible agreements by set criteria or standards. So this is number 2 step is a little involved. We go to the number 3 step, informational. Um, the informational foundations of integrative agreements are substantial. They involve each party becoming familiar with the best alternative and negotiated agreement. That is, each party must know what he or she will do if agreement cannot be reached. Both negotiating parties must identify and understand that their personal interests in the situation. They must know that what is really important to them in the case at hand, and they must come to an understanding of what the other party values. So this is more about knowing yourself and knowing your limitations, knowing what's really important in hand, um, in order for the negotiation to work smoothly. So here's some common pitfalls of negotiations. One, the fixed pie myth. The pie cannot be expanded. So sort of like you have a pizza pie, you have 10 people, and you have one pizza pie, so you think that only 8 people can eat. Well, you could reslice the pie, or you could just go and get a second pie for it to feed everybody. Escalating commitment, taking a stance and forcing to stick with it. Um, so this is, someone who, says, I can never live with this. And now, how would you negotiate around that? Overconfidence, always trying to understand the merits of the other party's position as well. So, if you're too overconfident, that can make you too strong of an element inside of negotiation and compromise. Too much telling and not enough active listening. And this is true of most conflicts where people are just shouting at each other. No one's really listening. They're just so desperate to express what they're feeling or thinking. If both parties take the time to step back and understand and listen, things will go a lot better. All right. So, here's some alternative strategies for negotiations. And one is a third-party negotiation. So, if the two people cannot decide how to solve a problem or negotiate constructively, they may want to pass it over to a third person to make the decision. Now, arbitration, I guess, is similar in that way that a neutral third party, such as a judge, is the power to make decisions that are binding to all parties. So, in a third-party negotiations, um, you can have a situation where you agree to a third-party negotiator, but you may not have to live with what they say. But if there's an arbitration, then it's binding to all parties, and there's not really much of a way out of it. Okay, mediation is the neutral third party that tries to engage the parties in negotiating a solution through persuasion and rational agreement. So this is a common approach for labor management negotiations where trained mediators acceptable to both sides are called in to help resolve the bargaining process. A mediator could be sort of a peacemaker between two countries. It's someone who's sort of going to grease the wheels and help negotiation move when it gets slowed down or stopped by two parties that are just too hostile to really directly or cooperatively negotiate with each other. Okay, so that's it for chapter 10. I look forward to next week when we're going to move into chapter 11, communication and collaboration. Um, See you then.